Shri Harivansh ji, Shri Ramashankar Singh ji, Srimati Ruchi Singh Chauhan ji, Professor Kamalkant Dwivedi, Dr. Daulat Singh Chauhan, Dr. Sunil Gupta, Dr. Swaraj Puri, members of the academic bodies and faculty of ITM University, distinguished nominees of honoris causa, degrees, my young friends who are graduating later today, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful to ITM University for this honor. I am happy to note that despite being a young university, the university's rankings, both in the state and in the country, are going up rapidly. The courses here, I note, cover a wide range of subjects from engineering, science and arts to pharmacy and agriculture. And this gives the academics here the opportunity to pursue research in multidisciplinary areas. As your VC said, ITM University encourages a lot of disciplines from aesthetics to creativity. And Professor Sunil Gupta was talking about purpose of education, and he gave a number of purposes, and this young lady over there, she gave one purpose. You know, the great philosopher A.N. Whitehead was once asked, what is the purpose of education? And he replied that age has experience, youth has creativity, and the purpose of university education is to transfer knowledge without destroying creativity. The India of our dreams is an India which is economically developed, which is scientifically advanced, and which is militarily strong. When we say economically developed, we want an India where the Human Development Index is high. The United Nations defines Human Development Index in terms of 3 parameters: per capita GNP, gross national product, life expectancy at birth, and adult literacy. And I have been saying for 3 decades and more that we need only 2 parameters: per capita electricity consumption and female literacy. I prefer female literacy to adult literacy because it's a measure not only of literacy but of equity and justice in that society. You find that in places where the female literacy is very high, as in the state P.T. Usha comes from, that's where the Human Development Index is relatively higher. And female literacy is not only a measure of literacy, but it correlates very strongly and inversely with parameters like birth rate, infant mortality. Where the female literacy is higher, the infant mortality is lower. When the female literacy is higher, the birth rate is lower. Now, we also want an India which is scientifically advanced, which has a very advanced research, development and innovation ecosystem with excellence in basic research, applied research, technology development, R&D-led innovation backed by high-quality manufacturing skills. And of course, we want an India which is militarily strong. In the Naidama lecture 20 years back, I said national development and national security are 2 sides of the same coin. राष्ट्रीय विकास और राष्ट्रीय सुरक्षा एक ही सिक्के के 2 पहलू हैं. Development without security is vulnerable. Security without development is meaningless. The greatest advantage of recognized strength is you don't have to use it. That is the principle of nuclear deterrence. When I speak to university audiences, I tell girls, learn self-defense. If the undesirable character knows that you can deliver a karate chop at a sensitive point, and you deliver it, that is called retaliatory deterrence. But if the above mentioned undesirable character knows that you are capable of delivering that karate chop with the above mentioned sensitive point, he will not bother you. That is preventive deterrence at a personal level. Nuclear is no different. The greatest disadvantage of perceived weakness is that your enemy may get adventurous. Now I see the charkha there, and your Vice Chancellor also told me that we are celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was an apostle of non-violence. But he never said that you can't use violence to protect yourself in his speeches. He didn't prevent the Indian army from joining the Allied forces to fight the fascist dictatorships of Hitler and Mussolini. And his message, instrument of non-violence to fight oppression, has been used by other people like Martin Luther King in the United States to fight the oppression against the blacks in the United States. Not only the intellectuals and the elite in India accepted Gandhi's leadership, but also the poor people. If I today go dressed like this to a village, they don't trust me. They don't look like I will do anything for them. They think next day I open the Times of India to see whether my picture is there, patting somebody's head or something like that. That is why Gandhi dressed like them, lived like them. He was a very smart person. He knew if he dressed like that, people will trust him. And of course he genuinely believed so. Charkha is symbolic. Charkha was symbolic of the way he thought the rural people must get livelihood. Today, under a program I started when I was the principal scientific advisor, this is located in 7 IITs. We have leg-operated Ambar Charkha. Why do you use the hand which gets tired so often? The leg is more sturdy. IIT Kharagpur has made leg-operated Ambar Charkha, leg-operated, same thing holds for pottery. Why do you use your hand? Operate with the leg like you do the sewing machine. They have made leg-operated pottery methodology, motor-operated pottery methodology. And the one that they have done in IIT Kharagpur, it has spread. And one of the master potters there earns 10,000 rupees a day. And he is becoming a master trainer for other potters. I've always said a person near the poverty line, his quality of life is a very non-linear function of his income. Suppose the poverty range, let us say 100. If he earns 110 rupees and 100 rupees goes on survival, his quality of life is proportionate to 10 rupees. But to double his income, his quality of life goes up by one order of magnitude. That is why it is very important. We had a discussion here on many interesting subjects. McEwan talked about caste system. Because this is a disgusting system, there is no question about it. And it was also referred to by you. But Hinduism is across a number of philosophies. If you go to the ultimate philosophy of Hinduism, which is Advaita Vedanta, Advaita is about differentiated religions, let alone the caste system. And Advaita is compatible with all modern discoveries. Now, I'm not talking about somebody here or have made some discovery and all that. But the basic philosophy of Advaita, see in science, when you talk about Raman effect or Schrodinger equation or Einstein equation or the work of Abdus Salam for the standard model of the nucleus, which you would know very well, you are a high energy physicist to start with. Nobody bothers about which country he came from or Madame Curie came from or which religion he belongs to. I've always said there is a universal consciousness in science more than any other discipline. And this is the basis of Advaita Vedanta. And I think sooner or later all countries, all people in the world have to adopt this. Now you see, the Vice Chancellor mentioned that most advanced technologies today are multidisciplinary. And it's absolutely correct. When we did our Pokhran test, which was mentioned, three agencies are involved. Department of Atomic Energy, which has been working on it, as you mentioned, from 1970, in order to design the device. The Defense Research and Development Organization, which made a very important contribution, particularly the Terminal Ballistics Research Lab in Chandigarh. They are expert in explosives because we wanted explosive lenses. Just as you have optical lenses, you need explosive lenses to create a point into a spherical wave. And we wanted the army, in order to give protection to the site, maintain the shafts which had been dug for a very long time. Three bodies: Department of Atomic Energy, DRDO and Army. You know the movie Amar Akbar Anthony में एक पोएम आती है, अनहोनी को होनी कर दे, होनी को अनहोनी, एक जगह जब मिले हों तीनों, DAE, DRDO and the Army. See, we need energy security, because that's the one, as I said, whatever we do, unless we are able to increase per capita electricity production by whatever method suits you, India cannot become a developed country. And my estimate is, until you go up to something like 6 to 8 times the present level of per capita electricity production and consumption, minimum, India cannot become a developed country. That's what I mean by energy security. But that has to be done in the context of the climate change threat. Use methodologies which don't emit carbon dioxide, energy producing technologies. According to the 5th Assessment Report 2014 of the International Panel on Climate Change, they are very clear that from the pre-industrial levels even up to 2012, the world has warmed by something like 1 degree, plus or minus whatever it is. The amounts of snow and ice have diminished. and the sea level has risen. And I quote there saying key measures to achieve mitigation goals include development of renewable energy, nuclear, and carbon capture and storage. Of course, including bioenergy. Of course, you need forestation. But cutting forests is a very dangerous thing if you want to fight climate change. Best carbon sink are the forests that we have here. And in the short term, it appears that the cold countries will benefit short term. Because somebody in Siberia says, thank you very much, let the ice melt. And Russia will have access to more resources which are underground. And there is a new Stanford study which says, it came out in April this year, that shows that global warming has increased economic inequality since the 1960s. And they show that countries like Norway and Sweden have benefited, whereas a country like India has had economic damage done. More generally, countries in the northern hemisphere, the countries will benefit, countries in the southern hemisphere will suffer the damage. But in the long term, everybody is going to suffer. And that's what everybody now realizes. And as they mentioned, nuclear as one of the mitigation technologies is very fortunate that thanks to the vision of the founder of the Atomic Energy Program, Dr. Homi Bhabha, India now has comprehensive capability in what we call the fuel cycle. Mining for uranium, extracting uranium, making fuels, designing reactors, building reactors, take out the spent fuel, take the plutonium from that, use it in new kinds of reactors. This is what we call closing the nuclear fuel cycle. Instead of throwing away the fuel as waste, that will be an open cycle, reprocess, take out the plutonium and put it in new kind of reactors. That is part of the 3-stage program of India. Later, of course, we'll add thorium to that. Thorium inside a reactor becomes a good fuel, what we call the 233 isotope of uranium. If you are able to close the fuel cycle with plutonium, the same uranium will give you 50 times more power. Closing the nuclear fuel cycle. Make use. Because the normal uranium which burns in a reactor, uranium-235 isotope, is less than 1% of the total uranium which is available. The remaining 238 gets converted to plutonium-239 and goes round and round. Once in Hyderabad, I was explaining the closed nuclear fuel cycle that I explained to you now. And the next day, one of the newspapers said, Chidambaram wants to close the nuclear program. Close in the nuclear fuel cycle so that you get maximum value for the energy resources that we have. And if you are able to close with thorium, the same uranium will give you 600 times more power. When I was explaining this to Muhammad Al-Baradei, who was the former Director General of IAEA, he said, then shall we call nuclear as renewable energy? मैंने कहा उतनी दूर नहीं जाएंगे, थोड़ा मॉडेस्ट रहेंगे, नियर रिन्यूएबल कर दो, नियर रिन्यूएबल provided. And India's program is based on the 3-stage nuclear fuel cycle. Just before director, he passed away unfortunately, the Japanese Yuki Amano. He was in India in a lecture some years back, and he said, and I quote, I would like to conclude by noting that India's remarkable success in the field of nuclear technology is an inspiration for many developing countries. I also appreciate India's willingness to serve as a mentor for other Asian countries that have recently joined the IAEA. And he says India is the forefront of technological development in the nuclear sector, not least in the area of fast reactors and nuclear fuel cycles. Whether it's your car or your nuclear reactor, safety and reliability go together. If your car doesn't break down on the way, most likely it will never get into an accident. And in December 10, 2018, that is December last year, the indigenously built Unit 1 of the Kaiga pressurized heavy water reactor, nuclear power station, Karnataka, broke the world record for continuous operation of 941 days since May 13th, 2016. It had been held earlier by UK reactor. What am I waiting for? India has broken a world record. And because it operates so reliably and our engineers are very, very highly trained. Today's India is not an India of 30, 40 years back. We should go for international cooperation, but on an equal partner basis. That is why when I was Chairman Atomic Energy Commission, I signed an agreement with CERN, Center for European Nuclear Research, that will supply $40 million worth of equipment to what they call the Large Hadron Collider. In Geneva, there is a tunnel 100 meters below the ground, 26 kilometers in circumference. And here protons, which are hadrons, called the Large Hadron Collider, moving in opposite directions. And once in a while they are brought together and they collide. See, nuclear fission, that's the basis of nuclear energy. When mass disappears, energy is produced. Most of you know the good old Einstein equation. E is equal to mc squared. Mass disappears, energy is produced. But if energy disappears, mass has to be produced. So when they collide, new particles are produced. And the higher the energy of the colliding particles, the higher is the possibility of a particle with higher mass being produced. So they knew that the only missing particle in this standard model of the nucleus was the so-called Higgs boson. See, there is a theory called the Big Bang theory, in which when the world was created, particles were created, and the masses to these particles were given by what is called the Higgs field. And the particle involved was the Higgs boson. Boson is named after Satyendranath Bose. There are only two kinds of particles in the world at that fundamental level. If the spin is half, you call them fermions, named after Enrico Fermi. If it is zero, spins are like the photon, or Higgs boson, integral spin, you call it boson, after Satyendranath. There are only two kinds, fermions and bosons. And as they go around, the particle, because the charged particle, the proton, it is bent by a dipole magnet. But it is focused by corrector magnets, superconducting magnets, superconducting sextupole, octupole, decapole magnets. And in that 26 kilometer ring, there are 1,800 of them. All those were supplied by India, Mint and Brown. And they put it there not because they love Indians, of course they may like Indians, but this was the best technology offered. Designed by our Rajaramana Center in Indore, but made by a private company. In a similar fashion, we are participating in the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, fission and fusion. When heavy particles like uranium break up, there is a mass deficit. You get nuclear fission energy. When light particles, like say isotopes of hydrogen merge, fusion, there is a mass deficit. That also gets converted to energy. And of course this has to happen at something like 100 million degrees. And there is no material which can hold this kind of temperature, the plasma at this temperature. So it has to be confined by a magnetic field. So this donut shaped plasma, which is big, called, because the Russians thought of it first, it's called the tokamak, is the basis of this international thermonuclear experimental reactor being built in France, and India is a member. Not in cash, but India is contributing. And they are building a cryostat in our Institute of Plasma Research in Gandhinagar. It's the biggest cryostat ever built in the world, 30 meters in diameter, 30 meters in height, designed by IPR, Institute of Plasma Research, made by L&T in Hazira. And hopefully, and the advantage of being a member, in equal partner member, in such international mega technology or in fact science projects, is that you have access to all the IPR that is generated there. Because you are a member, because you are contributing. Other countries may have done something, but you have access to all these technologies. So you see, India today must be present in all areas of high technology. Of course, at the other end, there should be no poverty. You don't want anybody to be poor in this country. The UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, many of you would have read that. First is no poverty, no hunger, affordable health care. Hopefully, if you are not poor, you are not hungry. And if you are little beyond that, you are able to take care of medical. Of course, the government can also help. The recent Nobel Prize to Abhijit Banerjee was for his work on poverty, how to remove. He has developed an experimental approach, a pioneering experimental approach with randomized controlled trials, and it has been considered very successful. But of course, I'm talking more on science and technology. Professor Banerjee's work is in the area of social sciences, education and delivery of health care and all that. But more and more we realize that science and technology should interlink with social sciences, particularly for introducing and then scaling up innovations in this sector. Now, this ROOTAC program I mentioned too. India is a big country. Sometimes you forget we are not a tiny country like one of those island countries somewhere. We are a huge country. So our technology needs range, apart from having the greatest biodiversity in the world, as Dr. Vandana Shiva said. Similarly, our technology needs range from nuclear and space to rural. In these areas, space we are, of course they launched the Chandrayaan-2, only the last 2 kilometers. They had a lander problem, they had a lander had a hard landing. But the other sensors are working extremely well and go on supplying data for a long time. And under ROOTAC we have done a lot of things. For example, once so much knowledge is available in the country, but it's not reaching our rural areas. In Uttarakhand, we work closely with a person called Professor Anil Joshi, who heads this Himalayan Environmental Science and Conservation Organization. And he once told me that off rainy season, there is a very big water problem in Uttarakhand. Water runs away downhill and doesn't stay long enough to recharge the aquifers. For they build on top of the hill what is called the khals. Khal. It's like a water pond. And the water seeps through broken rock and reaches the aquifers. But his problem was, how do I know it will reach the aquifers where the villages are located and not run away to useless places? So we brought in the BRC scientists using a technique which we call isotope hydrology. The ratio of heavy hydrogen to noble hydrogen, tritium content and so on, oxygen 18, oxygen 16. They found the root of the water and put subsurface dikes at those points. That water went the way they wanted. And the average recharge of the aquifers went up by 3 times. 3 times. And many dry aquifers started showing water. And buffaloes have come back. Many of you know that buffaloes need a bath more than humans. That's why they keep wallowing in water, otherwise they'll fall sick. Water came back, buffaloes have come back. And buffaloes are a very important part of rural economy. Milk for the children, and also they are able to change and make some. And as I said, there is a very interesting book by Yuval Noah Harari, Homo Deus. Earlier book was Homo Sapiens, which was a bestseller. And what he says there is, humans, and I quote, humans nowadays completely dominate the planet, not because the individual human is far smarter and more nimble-fingered than the individual chimp or wolf, but because Homo sapiens is the only species on earth capable of cooperating flexibly in large numbers. And you must add to that communication is the foundation on which the cooperation is based. That's why we had recommended from our office the National Knowledge Network, which now connects 1,600 knowledge institutions in the country. It's also valuable for what is called big data science. Now let me come to the end of my talk. Let me conclude by saying technology is power. The famous futurologist Alvin Toffler once said, yesterday violence was power. Today wealth is power. Tomorrow knowledge will be power. Now why is it like that? Why is violence power and even continues to be powerful? That whoever had the best technology for inflicting violence was the most powerful. As we know from Indian history, how we have lost to invaders technology. Why was wealth power? You may generate the knowledge, but whoever has the money to convert that knowledge into technology is the most powerful. Knowledge itself, of course, is the one that has to be converted in technology. That's why I have paraphrased Alvin Toffler to say technology is power. Because technology is power, countries and companies try to dominate technology. They do it by 2 methods: intellectual property rights and technology control regimes. So if India is to become a powerful country, we must have the ability to generate new technology, generate new knowledge. Not only that, you must have the ability to appropriate knowledge developed in other countries, convert it into value for your own country. And of course, you must get immune to technology control regimes, which we have done. See, NPT and all we have kind of taken care of, or missile control technology. But you must also remember that you cannot build a technology superstructure without a foundation of higher education and research. And that is why universities like ITM come in. Well, there are many stories. See, when they were making the first bomb in Manhattan, plutonium is a very strange metal, they were trying to make a bomb out of plutonium. It goes through half a dozen phases. When you take it from the molten state to a solid state at about 300 degrees, it becomes a solid. In what we call delta phase, which is 15 gram per cc density. Then you cool it to room temperature. As a solid, it goes to another phase, which we call the alpha phase, which is 19 gram per cc. Now, if you make a solid at 15 grams and change the density to higher density, it will become porous and brittle. Cannot be used in a nuclear weapon. The engineers tried hard, they couldn't. Finally, they went to a basic research scientist, Cyril Stanley Smith. He said, add 3% gallium, it will never go to the alpha phase. Problem solved. Stanley Smith was not interested in nuclear weapons. That is why when you develop technology, you must be surrounded by people who have knowledge in basic research, who have worked in areas which they had not thought would have any application. And of course, in a civilized country like India, basic research is also a cultural necessity. You don't ask a C.V. Raman or Srinivas Ramanujam, you give me a project report. I and Kamal Dwivedi will sit down and work out should we fund you or not. Completely absurd. But then of course you make big projects, there is accountability and so on. Now, you young people now, I'm addressing them, not the first row. You are entering your careers after you get your degree this afternoon. Of course, some of you are still continuing your studies here. You know, Einstein was once asked, what is it that makes a great scientist? His reply was interesting. He said, people think it is the intellect. They are wrong, it is the character. You must, of course you need intellect, but if you don't have character, you can never become a great scientist. Of course, coming back to Mahatma Gandhi, he was a person of great character. I think he's the only leader who one day will decide, no, you guys are not doing what I thought you will do, I take 180 degrees turn. The people who are following him will be surprised, will be frustrated, but then that is it. That is what. The greatest quality in a leader is that you may realize, and many of you are talented, and I'm sure many of you will become leaders in this country, and then you must have self-belief. Swami Vivekananda once said, the great man said it 100 years back. What he said was, today an atheist is one who does not believe in God. But he said tomorrow the atheist will be one who doesn't believe in himself, self-belief. So you must have self-belief. Character, self-belief, optimism. Don't watch too much TV. Don't sit hours on your mobile reading all kinds of things. Of course you must see mobile serves your useful purpose. See, Rutherford once, you should work hard, of course you should work hard. But you should think. Rutherford was once asked a student told him, sir, I work very hard, I come 7:30 in the morning and go back home only for dinner. After some time he asked, sir, I'm still continuing that 7:30. Then Rutherford asked him, when do you think? You must have time to think. If you occupy yourself with watching TV, some person of low IQ makes a stupid comment in some remote corner and is discussed by half dozen or hopefully people with greater IQ, and we are supposed to watch it for half an hour as entertainment. Have optimism. And finally, have a passion. Do great things for yourself and your country. Thank you and Jai Hind.